Who is your number one team as of today? Is it Alabama? Can Alabama jump Auburn and Duke? Are we gonna get a number one versus number two matchup on Saturday night when Auburn has to go to Tuscaloosa?
See, I don't like the people that automatically, because you lose, they automatically drop you. I don't understand that, because there might be a big gap. No, it's not me. I'm actually completely the opposite. I don't drop people because I think there's a gap between Auburn and Duke, for instance. But looking at Alabama's resume, which I did, and looking at Auburn's resume, and part of it is obviously they're in the SEC, but part of it is I thought they both played really, really difficult non-conference schedules that were better than Duke's. Now, Duke beat Auburn, but it was at Cameron, right? Other than that, they beat Arizona on the road, and they beat Louisville on the road. Other than that, they haven't beaten any other surefire tournament teams. They've beaten Pitt, Carolina, SMU. None of those are locked tournament teams right now. You look at what Auburn's beaten. I mean, at home, Purdue, Missouri, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Iowa State, and Memphis on a neutral. At Houston, at Ole Miss, Alabama's beaten Illinois, Creighton at home, Houston on a neutral, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Mississippi State on the road, and they've got other wins against fringe tournament teams. I think it's clear that, to me, it's Auburn, Alabama. They should be 1-2. I would probably still go with Auburn, but I think it's close. I'll have them at 1-2, and I will have Duke at 3. I still want you to throw it to me after we're done with this conversation of the biggest winner off that Duke game, because it was not Clemson.
Who was? Just go now. Who was it?
North Carolina. They play Clemson Monday. And now that becomes a resume game in which Carolina won today. They held on, right? Like, it was not pretty against Pittsburgh. But now they've got a big-time resume win where they go into Clemson and Littlejohn on a short turnaround for Clemson, where they're feeling great about themselves, right? They just beat Duke. And who knows? Carolina could go in there and get that win. And if they do, they're firmly in the field.
In the field? Okay.
In the field.
No. Okay. Relax. Jeff Goodman, bracketologist. Okay.
For the time being. I'm not saying they're staying in, but
they're firmly in the mix. They're firmly in the mix. Mike, I'm going to phrase it to you like this. Instead of not talking about rankings, whatever it is, who is the best team in college basketball right now?
I mean, who are you taking? Who are you taking is the biggest thing, right? Like I think the question should be like, if you're betting your house, who are you betting it on? Are you betting it on Alabama? Are you betting it on Auburn? Are you betting it on Duke?
See, here's my thing with Alabama is we can look at their resume for the whole entire year, but Chris Youngblood came back almost 8-9 games into the season. And I'm pretty sure they're 13-1 with him. Like, this has been a different team, and they were already good, but they hit another gear when he was, wasn't injured anymore and was in the lineup. And so that's what I'm looking at with Alabama. And that's the reason why, when you go down the line, this is a Final Four team last year that is leaps and bounds better defensively this year. And still as effective offensively, and has so much more lineup optionality than they had last year. And so I would bet on Alabama, and I get that may be recency bias given what's happened today, but I do think Duke is probably the most complete team. I know I mentioned that last week. Auburn, there's some stuff there, like losing on your home floor in that fashion today, just kind of, that'll always kind of give me some pause, even though I know Ole Miss went into Alabama about a month ago, wherever it was, and got a win on their home floor. But as the season's gone on, I've become more and more, I guess, a fan of Alabama and the way they've put this together. Because you got to look at Alabama this way, right? Their program and what Nate Oates has built. You get Chris Youngblood, who comes from South Florida, and Cliff Amore, who comes from Rutgers. And both of those guys, in addition to a few other transfers they got, obviously, but both of those guys had a certain way that they played. And honestly, it didn't really match the way that Alabama plays. Because Alabama, we saw last year, you are allergic to the mid-range. You shoot threes and you shoot shots around the rim. And you play with pace. You don't really have, you don't throw it in. You don't play 4 out, 1 in and play through a post, a post player. So you go out and get Cliff Amore, who was back to the basket at Rutgers. They threw it into him nonstop. And then you get Chris Youngblood, who, took, I think, 65 mid-range pull-up twos last year. You know how many he's taken this year? 2. You know how many back to the basket post touches Cliff Amore's gotten this year? Pretty much 0. And those guys come in, and you can look at it whatever you want as the fit of those guys, but they just assimilate. That's just what they do. And to me, that's a sign of a true program. And that's why they have me buying in more and more as it goes on, because I like their effort. I like their body language. I said, the optionality with their lineups. They're effective on both ends now. You couldn't really say that last year. So, I think those 3 are at the top. I mean, Houston's, you can say they're knocking on the door, but those 3 I think are
it's those,
cut
it's
above
those
the rest.
3. Yeah, it's those 3 that are 1, 2.
I mean, Rob might have Louisville there, Mike. You know that. Rob might have Louisville in that tier as well. Who knows? Look at him right now. I mean, he's so excited talking about Louisville that he froze. That's how crazy it is. But there's nobody else in that tier to me. I think those are the 3. And to me, I'm with you. And Alabama doesn't even have Darian Reed right now. Think about that. They're going to get him back here in the next week or so, but they've been playing without Darian Reed, who's talented, probably be a first-round pick at the end of this season. The one thing I still worry about with them, and they're not as reliant on the 3, on having to make threes as they did a year ago. They don't shoot it great. Without Reitzel, who got hurt back in November, Youngblood probably will end up getting there, where he's maybe they're certainly one of their best shooters, but they're not a lights out 3-point shooting team. But they're not jacking as many threes as they were last year.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about Alabama, heading into conference play, our big question was they're shooting all these threes and they're shooting 32%, 31%, 30% from beyond the arc. In SEC play, they're up above 36%. And I think that's changed everything because of the amount of rim pressure with the way that they get to the basket, with the way that they get to the offensive glass. It's a difficult combination to deal with. Where does Tennessee fall for you guys? Real quick, I'm on just 30 seconds from each of you on the Vols. They went into Oklahoma, beat the brakes off Oklahoma. They've now won 3 in a row. They beat Florida by 20 with no Ziegler and no Ivicic, no Milicic on last Saturday. So, Jeff, real quick, how far is Tennessee, who is the number 4 team in the country, from those top 3 for you?
Boy, I don't know if there is one. I don't know. What are we talking? We're talking Tennessee, Houston, Florida. I might go Florida.
We're just talking Tennessee. I only asked you about Tennessee.
That's all we're talking about, Tennessee. All right. I would say for me, the Vols are still a little bit questionable. I don't have the trust factor still isn't there. Maybe it's because they just haven't done it in the tournament. I like their pieces. We talked about it the other day. But I want to see it more often for Milicic than anything else.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah. Over the course, I think the Mizzou game, and we've seen over the course these last few weeks, and Rob, you and I have talked about it a ton, just what they do offensively. The conversation's always about defense with Tennessee, but their dynamism offensively over the last few weeks has really gotten my attention. I mean, today you've seen they've jacked threes at a pretty high rate, the last month or so. And you saw it today when those fall, they're virtually unbeatable because they do what they do defensively. But at one point in the game, it's 33-19 at Oklahoma today, and they're 14 of 16 from the field. They've done it in absolutely every way. Milchitz gets downhill, lob to Akpara, hit ahead to Lanier for a 3. Ziegler gets downhill, he scores, and then you're kind of on your heels as a defense. And then, like I said, they're 14 of 16 from the field, 33-19. Then they turn the ball over 4 of their next 5 possessions, and Oklahoma's still on 19 points after that. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying. Like, they had 19 turnovers today, which if you're Rick Barnes, that's a major talking point. But if they can reel that in and they hit shots consistently, in addition to what we know they can do defensively, they're going to get closer and closer to that tier and probably end up on the 1 line.